Hey guys, welcome back to another recap of The Young and the Restless for Thursday, March 7th. And it's another court day with Michael calling Victoria up to the stand. And he's asking her to recount her relationship with him. She says that they were once married and they had broken up, and he married Mackenzie and had 2 children with her, but they ended up being divorced and he moved back to Genoa City. Reed had wanted to stay with Victoria before Mackenzie and JT broke up. They had moved to Poland, so Reed moved in with Victoria for a while. But ultimately, Mackenzie and JT broke up and he moved back to Genoa City, and for a while they were good and they got close and everything was fine, but gradually he became abusive during the course of their relationship. First being emotionally abusive, putting her down, talking about her hair, how she could do things better at work, with her relationships, how her father controlled her, and she started to doubt herself over the course of time. He didn't turn physically abusive at first until later on. Michael submits the information given by Victoria's therapist because Victoria said that she never told anybody about the abuse of JT except for her therapist. Mostly because, she was embarrassed and she just didn't want anybody to know, and she actually believed it would get better. She believed JT when he said that it wouldn't happen again, that he really did want things to work out between them. And so later on, she recounts that when he grabbed her by the throat, and Michael submits that there is video footage of this. He enters it into evidence, and the jury and the rest of the court see when JT and Victoria argued, and he had shoved her against the wall by the throat. And she'd gotten away and ran upstairs when that happened. Victoria explains what was going on during that confrontation, and she admits that that is the point she had hit him because she was fighting back, and Michael says is that what Phyllis was alluding to when she said that you hit JT, and she admits that yes, that's exactly when she hit him, and she hit him at no other time during their relationship. So then she said that at that point she basically had enough, and she had broken up with him and decided to leave. But he did come back and convince her to work things out. When they went away, he had taken away her phone, prevented her from talking to her family, checking voicemail, getting email, all that, and basically, again, continuing more of the emotional abuse. She just realized she'd had enough and ended up breaking it off and heading back to Genoa City that night. She tells Michael that she didn't tell the police about any of this because basically, she was afraid that nobody would believe her, that they just saw the video of JT being violent and still people question whether or not it's true. The prosecution's questioning whether or not that it was really murder instead of self-defense. So that's why she said, a lot of people don't believe it, but she's living proof that it does happen and it does exist to anybody. And she was just afraid. She was afraid he was going to kill her. She was afraid nobody was going to believe what happened to her. And so she just didn't tell anybody except her therapist what had happened. She says that the night it happened, she'd gone upstairs and after she told everybody about the abuse and was just trying to collect herself, calm down, and JT came in and they had a physical confrontation and arguing about everything. She was going to call the police and he ripped the phone out of her hands and she tried to make for the door, yet he slammed it shut and then backhanded her. She fell on the bed and tried to crawl away from him. And during the arguments, she realized that night that it was actually JT who tried to kill her father. And because she knew already that the person who did try to kill her father tried twice. Once by pushing him down the stairs, and then the second time by trying to turn off the ventilator in the hospital, that who knows what they would do, that they would do anything to protect their secret. And now that it's JT and here he is being violent, she feared that he was going to end up killing her. And that's really what she thought. She tells the story that he pushed her and he was against the dresser and he was banging angrily on the dresser and yelling at her. And the next thing she knew, he was on the floor. And her mother was standing over him with the fireplace poker. That her mom had reacted spontaneously, that she didn't want him dead. She was just trying to save her daughter. And that they all wanted to call the police. Sharon, they all did. But it was Phyllis who actually convinced them to cover it up because nobody would believe her. Why would they? So Victoria said she ended up doubting herself because JT had already made her doubt herself. So she trusted Phyllis's instincts and confidence more than she believed in her own. So, Michael states to the jury, this is the same woman who got immunity and is now the prosecution's star witness in the whole case. He says there's no further questions and sits down. Christine gets up to cross-examine Victoria. She says she's sorry to Victoria for what happened, that nobody should have to go through that, and it's a horrible thing for somebody to go through. And she asked her if she sustained any injuries. Victoria said no. She asked her, did she go to the doctor or tell anybody about it? She said no. And she says that Christine asked, did he ever get physical with her again? Victoria says no, but he did continue being emotionally abusive from the night of the original video when he grabbed her by the neck. Christine says to him, when he found out that he was working for the police department investigating your father, isn't that true? That's the real reason that you broke up with him. Victoria says no. And Christine says, I remind you, you're under oath. Victoria says, well, that's part of the reason, but that's not the whole reason why she broke up with him. And so Michael comes back up and redirects and asks her, how did she feel when JT had her by the throat and was pounding on the dresser. Victoria says she was terrified. She was sure he was going to kill her. And she was sure that he would have killed her if her mother hadn't come in and stopped him at that point. And she said that she feared she would never see her children again. And that nobody can really understand what it's like to go through that kind of thing unless you've been in that situation. And you really can't explain it. It's hard to. It's really hard. It's hard to understand that until you've suffered from emotional and physical abuse from a significant partner. And so Michael asks, what do you think would have happened if Nikki hadn't been there? And Victoria said she'd be dead. Christine objects and says it's irrelevant, and the judge sustains it and then tells the jury to disregard what Victoria said in that moment. They take a break, and Sharon and Brittany are talking, and they're talking about how awful it must have been for Victoria to relay such a horrible and emotional experience of abuse such as that. And Brittany agrees. And Brittany's saying that, and Sharon says that, it's changing. It's making it easier for women to come forward with their stories of abuse. And Brittany says, yes, but it's not changing fast enough. The media are making it seem like it's changing faster than it really is. But because a few brave women have come forward, but there's still a lot to do. There's still a lot of work. There's still a lot of emotional abuse and physical abuse going on that people are not aware of because they don't come forward. And that's really more of the truth of what's going on in life. Victoria and Nikki are watching Sharon and Brittany talking, and they're basically saying that Nikki says to Victoria, that Sharon's trying to pretend she's this poor me victim, and she really thinks this is working on them. And Victoria said, well, if it wasn't for her, they wouldn't be here in the first place. And it wouldn't have given Phyllis the ammunition to try to save herself in this whole thing. Outside, Billy and Nick are talking, and Billy regrets that he had convinced Phyllis to go to girls' night in the first place, because really, if it hadn't been for the fact that she convinced her to go, and Phyllis convincing the women not to call the police and to decide to cover it up instead, none of them would be in this position in the first place. They would have called 911. They would have gotten JT help, or at least the police would have known right away. And it would have been seen like it really was a self-defense instead of this whole supposed conspiracy theory and that they actually tried to commit murder and all that sort of thing, which it really wasn't at all. So Nick believes, he brings up to Billy, that maybe they can help the women by proving that JT's not really dead, that in fact the one living in the walls of the house and terrorizing the women and all that is actually JT. And Billy says, you really think he's alive? How could he be? And Nick says, well, what other explanation could there be but him? Who else would have motive to do this to the women except JT? One, it's revenge, and it even gets back at Victor for what slights JT perceives that he did to him and for the whole family. And he believes that if they can prove that, that could just be the thing that could get them exonerated. Judge calls him back, and court resumes. And it's closing arguments. Christine goes first, and she talks about how this whole trial is about choices, that they chose to kill JT. They chose to roll him up in a rug like roadkill and dump him on the side of the road, or dump him in the park, bury him in the park, instead of calling the police, instead of going to the police for help during the abuse, all that. And in fact, the women are happy he's actually dead because, well, it eliminates him from their lives. And she continues to say that Nikki murdered him basically in cold blood. Vicky and Sharon helped her cover it up. And that is the facts. That's why the jury has to find them guilty of murder or second degree intentional homicide. And that if they found them not guilty, it would actually send a rather dangerous message to the community that people can just take the law into their own hands and get away with it. And then, they can't send that kind of a message to the public. She finishes, and Brittany comes up and states that Sharon was a victim in this. She didn't want to do this. She's just as victim as JT and or Victoria. She was trying to do a good thing, trying to be helpful and support Victoria and cheer her up, and that she was actually used by the other defendants because she wanted to call the police, and she in fact was trying to call the police, but they stopped her from doing so and basically forced her to lie for months and roll him up in the rug and go along with what they wanted to do. And she really didn't want to do that, and she felt she had no other choice, because if she came clean, the mother of her, or the grandchildren of her grandmother of her children would go to prison unnecessarily, really. So she says to that effect, you need to find Sharon not guilty. Michael is last, and he talks about what is reasonable doubt. Well, reasonable doubt is when you find both the prosecution's argument in the case and the defense's argument in the case credible. That means the prosecution failed to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, that what they did was cold-blooded, intentional, all that. If that's the case, you need to say that it's not, that they are not guilty of the crime they're being charged with. And he says that the prosecution is trying to paint his defendants as some heartless, malicious, cold-blooded killers, when really they saw for their own eyes that JT was malicious, he was an abuser, and he wasn't a victim here, that they feared for their lives that night. They had every reason to. Victoria had every reason to. Just look at the proof. Nikki was only protecting her daughter. The others were afraid. They wanted to protect Nikki. They didn't think anybody would believe them. And if they actually believed that Nikki was a cold-blooded murderer, that Victoria wasn't a party to it, how could she have been? So if that's the case, the jury has to find them not guilty. Mia and Ray are talking in their apartment, and Mia comes at him about his feelings for Sharon, saying that she's the woman he wants, that she was humiliated, that it all came out in court, the whole world heard that her husband is in love with another man. And how does that make her feel? Did he think about that? And Mia feels that the only reason he can't be with Sharon is because she was arrested for murder. And she tells him, tell me that you don't love her. And at first he says that he's committed to her, that he was committed to his marriage, that there's different kinds of love. And she asks him, well, what kind of love do you have for Sharon? And he doesn't really answer that at the moment. He says to her, you're never satisfied with anything. No matter what he does, no matter what he says, she's not satisfied. She says she's working hard to make a life for herself that was better than what her parents had, better than what she had growing up. And he doesn't seem to understand that or really want to contribute to that seems to be in any way, shape, or form. And she says, after the courtroom, how does he expect her to forgive him? He comes in, excuse me, I'm not the one who cheated on you. You slept with my brother, and then when we're in the middle of making love, you call out my brother's name. And you're telling me you can't forgive me. I've forgiven you so much. And plus, look what you did to my sister. So, don't try to act innocent here. Mia asked him, did he ever sleep with Sharon? And he said he never did. But he said he's done. He can't keep doing this. This is a farce. Their relationship is really just beyond broken. And he finally admits he is in love with Sharon to Mia. And that Mia still has feelings for Arturo, and he can't get past that either. She says, well, even if I denied it, you wouldn't believe me. And he said, no, of course not. And he basically says that they really only hurt each other anyway. That's all the relationship is. That they just keep going back and forth, and he hurts her, she hurts him. It's not really a positive relationship. And really, it's been broken down for a while. Mia does still want to fix this and work it out. And Ray says he's tried, but, he's really kind of done. What more can they do? She says, well, what about me and the baby? You said you wouldn't abandon us. Ray says, I'm not going to. I told you I would be there for both you and the baby, and I will be. And I will keep your secret, and I won't tell anybody about what happened, what you did to Lola. So he gets his coat, and he's going to leave, and Mia asks where he's going, and he says he's going to go visit his sister, because that's his priority right now. He leaves, and Mia begins to cry. Well, that's it for today. It's looking pretty good. Thank you for watching, and give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more Y&R recaps. Don't forget, this is United States is tomorrow's episode, so it's a spoiler for you if you watch it today. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.